I work at Intel. What I wanted to go over today is basically from having a business idea or a project idea to actually making it a viable commercial idea. What I want to share today is the template that you're going to use to sort of summarize the projects for the next stage. And it's important to have a single template for the evaluators, because then it sort of standardizes the information that you're giving and standardizes the way in which they evaluate and review the information that you have. So the first thing, you always need a title slide, right? It's important for different reasons. One, submitted by and the date. First point, the description of your project. What are you doing? And in this section, you have quite a bit of leeway in terms of the description that you have, but the idea is that give a description of what it is. If you've got pictures already, if it's an actual product and you've got prototypes, if you've got something to illustrate and give a visual representation, all the better. So in that section, then you have a project description. Then your customer profiles. I've intentionally put only 3 rows here, because if you have more, especially at the beginning, it would be unideal to have more than 3 customer segments. Somebody once said, if you've got more than 3 priorities in life, you don't have priorities, because then that is the purpose of a priority, right? So I would suggest narrowing it down to a maximum of 3, especially at the beginning, and just understanding. So for that customer segment that you're looking at, what gap or need exists? Like, what are they missing? Right. And then, what unique value does your product or service fulfill? Like, why? Right? And the reason there are 3 different ones, because you could find that if you have segment 1, the gap that they have is not the same as a different customer profile. That's just an example of how you can break down your customer segment, identify what need they have, which is different from another customer segment, and figure out how to give them a service that's specific for their need. So you've got your project that you know, this is what I'm doing. You've identified the customer profiles, and for each you know, this is the gap, and this is how I'm going to fulfill that need. Again, it's a unique value proposition. If there's a need that this segment has, and you want to give them a service, if it's not unique, then why would they use yours? So it needs to be unique. Or if it's not unique in the service or product itself, something about it needs to be unique. Maybe how it's delivered, or how it's packaged, or just something about it needs to be unique. So for example, let me give you a unique value proposition. You've got a retail store in town that sells TVs. Right? And customers go there and they buy TVs for home use. And then Jumia comes up and is selling the exact same TV, but they've delivered the service differently. They're saying you don't need to physically go into a shop to buy the TV. You can browse online, pay, and it's delivered to you. So in that sense, the product itself is not unique. It's just that it's being delivered in a different way. Okay. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Your project will not exist in a vacuum. There'll be factors around it that will impact it either positively or negatively. And you can break those factors down: economic, social, government, and there's a bunch of others. So I've just said you can add technological, political, and legal if they exist. Okay, so value chain. Value chain is basically for you to produce your service or your product. Like we said, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. So this is not so much the environmental factors like the ones we just discussed. This is the actual people or players that will be suppliers, will be customers. This could be, depending on your product or service, this list could be 200 companies, it could be 2, it could be 1, depending on your product or service. Okay, your go-to-market plan. So you have your product, you know your customers, you've identified your suppliers, you're very clear on your value chain. So what? Your customers don't know it exists. So this is basically how are you going to create awareness and generate demand for your product or service. And it's a plan, so it can't be, okay, I'm going to place an ad in a newspaper, so what? It needs to be a consistent plan, and ideally an integrated plan where one thing links to another. So for example, you place an ad in a newspaper, it's just an example, place an ad in a newspaper and say, for more information, go to our Facebook page, X. And then once they're on Facebook, then you tell them, for a free sample, like our page. So then they like your page. Once they like your page, you know who they are. So next time you're doing an email marketing campaign, you can then market directly to those people who liked your page. You understand? How you sort of create an integrated, so there are multiple activities, but they all sort of help each other. Your revenue model. So yes, you've got a product or a service, but there's different ways to make money from products and services. What's your specific revenue model? And they are not 1, 5, 10. There's lots of different models that you could use. Some you could create. Again, the thing we talked about, unique value propositions, it could be that you created a new revenue model for an existing product. So just to give you an idea, let's discuss just a few. Like I said, there's lots and lots and many of them. There's variations of these, there's combinations of these, but let's just go over a few for you to get an idea of the different revenue models. So the add-on model. It's where you take a basic, or you take a service, keep the cost low, you make it like sort of the most basic you can, and then keep the cost low. So when the customer looks at it, they're like, oh, that doesn't look too expensive. But then you have added products or services which might be charged at a premium that increase the cost of those services. So you might find that the company generates more revenue, not from the actual basic product, but from the add-on products, right? So let's take Ryanair. So Ryanair became popular because it was one of the very first super low-cost airlines. They're an Irish airline, I think. Super low-cost. They took the cost of a ticket, slashed it by crazy, so it became very affordable to fly. But you pay for every single thing you can think of on that flight. If you want to have luggage, you pay. You get on the flight, you want to have a Coke, you pay. So that's add-on. Advertising model is that you create a platform, doesn't have to be, it could be anywhere, online, wherever it is, and then you charge people because you've got reach, you've got an audience. So YouTube is an example. YouTube in itself, for me to access the service, is free. But they'll charge other companies to advertise because everybody here is on YouTube and watching. So in this case, you're not the customer in that sense. It's the company that will be charged to put ads. So people, I don't know if it's a magazine or a newspaper, it's free. They hand it out on the street. But the person who pays is the person who puts the ad in the newspaper, because people will go and say, every day we reach 2 million people, for example. A billboard, they create the billboard in a place where they've done their research and say this billboard every day is seen by 500,000 people. So therefore, Nivea, you pay me 300,000 Kenyan shillings per month to put your ad on this billboard. Auctions. I've put one of the larger international ones, but they're local ones. They are business models that you don't set a specific price. You totally let the economic demand and supply dictate the price. So it's hard to dictate, it's hard to focus to some extent how much you're going to make. You could set a minimum and say for this product, the minimum is 5,000 shillings. But then you open and let people bid for it. And that's one of the ways to do it, but it's tricky. I mean, it's not very common, and it needs to be things where you know you've got reduced supply and increased demand. Otherwise, if you have 2 million of something and 5 people, nobody's going to bid for anything, right? So it depends on the product or the service. Bait and hook model, as it suggests, you bait them, and then once they're hooked, they're hooked. Bait and hook is where you sell them something, probably reduce the price at the beginning, but you know that's not where you're making your money. You're making your money in something they'll need after. So printer, guys, that's typical. So you'll buy a printer for 2,000 shillings. You got a good deal. Printer was 2,000 shillings. And then you're printing and printing and printing. And 2 months later, you need a new cartridge. And the cartridge is 3,000 shillings. Direct sales. So if I go back to the slide where we had here, there are people who go from manufacturing direct to the consumer. You decide you want to skip all the middlemen, because this is just one retailer, but you could have 3 depending on your product. You could have manufacturer, distributor, wholesaler, retailer, and customer. You could have lots of middlemen. There are companies that decide to keep costs down. We're going to cut out all of that and sell direct to the end customer, right? And one of the companies that made this model very common or very popular is a cosmetics company in the US called Avon. So Avon would make the product, and then they would recruit ladies like housewives or people who want to work in the day, give them a sales kit, so like they had a bag with like sample products, and they would go door to door selling to people. That was direct sales. They didn't do retail. You couldn't go to a supermarket or a pharmacy and find those products. They had direct sales from manufacturer to end customer. The KFC you see in Kenya, it doesn't mean that the original company or owner of KFC in the US has come and opened KFCs in Kenya. It's a Kenyan entrepreneur or businessman or whatever who's gone and told KFC, I want to open KFCs. And they pay royalties to KFC to open. And then there's rules and regulations about the standards you must meet, the colors you use, the layout, everything. So that around the world, wherever you go, you walk into a KFC, it is the exact same. If they come and check and see you're not following the standards, they withdraw your license, your franchise license, right? So Hilton, it's not one Hilton in the world. It's people who've gone and said, I want the Hilton franchise for Nairobi. I want the Hilton franchise for Kampala. Yeah. Freemium is where your basic product is free. Premium is a combination of free and premium. So you start free, but then to get additional products or services, you pay. Spotify is a very popular music streaming service. So you go onto the Spotify site, you get an account, and you sort of give, this is the type of music I like, then you can just stream and listen for free. But if I want to skip to the next song, if I want to listen offline, for example, if I don't want to listen to ads between songs, then I have to pay. Yeah. So Spotify is another very popular freemium model. Pay as you go, we've discussed Safaricom. Classic, yeah? Subscription, you could still look at Safaricom postpaid, but things like DSTV, where you pay a monthly fee, be monthly, quarterly, whatever duration, to access continued services. You don't pay, they cut you off. So that's subscription models. So this is just a couple of them. There's lots of them. There's variations and combinations and permutations of these. You could create your own. Like I said, that could be your unique differentiating factor. So that's just an example. So look at your business and understand, if you go back up here, what revenue model are you using for your product or service? Financials. Are you clear on your project? Nothing's free. Do you know how much money you're going to need? Right? Where is it coming from? And in this, where is it coming from? Be specific. 2% is coming from my savings. 50% is coming from friends and relatives. So be specific about where it's coming from. Your sales revenue. So you've sold all these products, 1 revenue stream, 2 revenue streams. Overall, what have you collected? And then your cost of sales, because it will cost you something to sell the service. You could find the largest of that could be to acquire the actual product. So say back to Brookside, you could find that the largest cost comes from buying the milk from the farmers. Then another large cost could be in processing the milk. So if you list all of those things, what's the total for cost of sales? Marketing, salaries, all of that. What's your total cost of sales? Then that will give you your net profit. This is like basic. I'm sure you've all done. Yeah? Tax and net profit after tax. And then in your backup, give 2 separate, 1 slide each for cost of sales. Give that breakdown. The reason being is that sometimes people are unrealistic or they have the wrong priorities, and it's important to look at that. So cost of sales here is important to evaluate what are your priorities in the business. Are you thinking straight? Are you thinking with the business in mind or your image in mind? And cash flow projection. Revenue does not equal cash flow. Just because you make money or you sell something in month 1 doesn't mean you're going to see the revenue for it in the same month. Maybe your customer has said, standard terms are, we pay you 3 months after invoice, 90 days. So that affects your cash flows. So your cash flow projection is also important. How do you expect to make money? And at what intervals does that money come in? Competitive landscape. It's highly unlikely you're the only one who's ever thought to do what you're doing. It's most likely somebody who's already doing what you're doing. Again, it could be that you tweak something about it, but still, it's unlikely you're going to be the first ever to do anything. So your competitors could be direct, or rather, like absolute same if your product is the same, or sort of, if you're a taxi service, then Uber would be competition and vice versa. Right? So pick like top 3 competitors and know something about them. You can't operate in a vacuum. So, and this is important because it tells you something. You look at this and things will jump out at you. So for example, if you are thinking to start your business or have the project office be in, that's for example, in Hurlingham, and then you look at your top 3 competitors and all of them are in Nanyuki. That's not a coincidence. There's something they know that you don't. You are founded. You look at your top 3 competitors and none of them are older than 2 years. That again should tell you something. What happens to companies in this industry after 2 years? Is it that the product has a lifespan of 2 years? What? So just look at some of these standard sort of metrics about your competitors. For your own reference or your own understanding, you can add 4 or 5, whatever helps you understand the business better. But when you look at these things, certain things will jump out at you. And then of course, their strengths and weaknesses, and be objective. Competitor activity, what are they doing? So like if you're starting, your project is to start a new telco company. What's Safaricom doing? So this is also good for you because it gives you an idea. If your competitors are doing sort of the same things, that could mean that is what works, or it could be maybe there's a gap here in reaching a new audience. So again, when you look at the things your competitors are doing, it tells you something. Your team, or if it's just you, why on earth do you think you're the right person to do this? And I am awesome is not the answer. Why? The team. What team do you have? This one I like. Why? This has nothing to do with money or the product. You look at all the successful people who started projects, whether that project was for profit, not profit, whatever it was. Anybody who started an idea and did something with it, the guys who are successful, like mega successful, they all say one thing in common. It needs to be something you're passionate about. After you've done all that, you come to the summary, which is, well, summary. And some key things, summary of the idea and your why. Maximum of 300 characters. There's a reason it's limited to 300 characters. The shorter something is, or the more concisely you can communicate something, the greater chance that you understand what it is that you're saying. Project description, I don't imagine you need pages and pages to do this. So all of this is knowledge, it's just knowledge. Wisdom comes from actually applying and doing it. Knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are fruit. That's knowledge. I know. Scientifically, whatever, tomato is actually a fruit, if it's classified. Wisdom is knowing that I don't put tomatoes in a fruit salad.